Hey guys, Dwayne here. Today I want to talk a little bit about how our children process a lot of this stuff. I know I've talked about it before, but I think it's something that it's an ongoing issue that bears reminding, just because it's something that we're going to go through. It's something we're going to have to deal with. It's something our children are going to deal with. And it's good to understand it and have an idea of what's going on so that you can prepare yourself for it and adjust accordingly when it happens. And what I'm talking about are the times whenever our children make comments to you about that they understand what's going on, right? And I've been talking about this a lot lately because that's been an ongoing theme for me lately. And what happens is you're going to have these conversations where your child will communicate with you that they get it, that they understand that there's a problem, that they understand that it's not healthy for them, that they understand that it's damaging, but they really aren't going to do a whole heck of a lot about it. And conversely on that, what'll happen is when they go back to the other parent, things will revert back to the way they were. It's like the abuse didn't happen, or maybe it wasn't as bad, or maybe they even say that they feel like they've over embellished it. And it's really tough, right? Because whenever you're sitting there struggling with your kid or your kids to try to help them through this, and you're hoping that they're going to have the same type of realization as you. And what I mean by that is not the realization that the other person is a monster, which I guess that would be good, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the realization of what's going on, so you have a way to wrap your head around it to get some closure on it, right? I mean, because that's what's happened to a lot of us, is when we finally got to the point where we understood what was going on, it cleared up a lot of things in our head and in our mind of why it happened, what was going on, why they were doing this. Because up until that point, we're trying to process everything that they do under the guise of a normal person. We're trying to look at it, we're trying to rationalize what they're doing and why they're doing things in that mindset. And the problem is that, as we know, they don't have the same mindset. Their values and goals and all of that stuff is completely different than ours. And we're hoping that our children will still see the same thing, so that they can develop a relationship of almost like mutual understanding, right? So that they understand what their other parent is doing, and they can put it in a almost like a box, so that they understand what's going on. They don't necessarily take it personally, and they can minimize and mitigate the damage that's happening. The problem is that and I've talked about this before, they are in the same mode that we were in when we were in the relationship, and that is that we don't really want to believe it. And when you're dealing with somebody who's a covert narcissist, I mean, even overts will do this, but it's even more subtle and harder when it's a covert, and that is they're not that way 100% of the time. You know, if you're an overt narcissist or even physically violent, you're not doing that, or they're not doing that act, you know, every minute of every day. Well, I mean, in some situations maybe they are, but typically it's not. And what happens is you get confused because you think that the bad behavior or the abusive behavior is an anomaly. You think that well, maybe there was a reason for it, or maybe I pushed them too much, maybe it was just a bad day, or they said that, but they didn't really mean it. I can't tell you how many times I've said that about people at work and whatnot, where they do things and then I validate it, or not validate it, that's not the right word. I justify it, or I make excuses for it. And that's exactly the same thing that our kids are going through. It's even harder because it's their parent. Like I said before in other videos, they don't want to believe it. They don't want to acknowledge that this is true. And it's like the abuse has to be so pervasive that it overwhelms their ability to process it anymore to finally make a change. And when I say that, think about it in your situation, okay? More than likely, you are in the same boat. Like for me, I lived in that whole environment for a really long time, and it finally came to a head. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I knew that enough was enough. I knew I couldn't deal with it anymore, and I knew that I deserved an opportunity to have a good life without sacrificing myself so that the other person can be happy. But for me, that took like 20 years. You know, I mean, if I look back, there were a lot of indicators of what was going on. But my point is that it takes a long time for us. It's even going to be harder for our children, and we have to be aware of that. So the hard part about this is that you're going to feel like you're making progress. You're going to feel like your kids are really on target and they're getting it, and maybe you're going to get some stability. Then they'll go back and visit, or spend their visitation time with the other parent, and then come back, and it's like they were re-brainwashed with, to think that things aren't, that they're not dealing with it. And it's just going to take time for that emotional abuse to happen again, to beat them down, to start over, to start that conversation again. So we have to keep all of this in context and frame it in the reality of what it is. And the reason I say that is because it can be really traumatizing for us when these things first happen. And the reason I bring it up is because more than likely, like I said at the beginning of this, you're going to go through the same thing. And the bad part about it is you're going to feel like you have this aha moment, and you're going to feel like you've had this breakthrough. And then whenever you realize that it's basically Groundhog Day again and it starts back over, it's really tough. Now, when that happened to me early on, it was really frustrating. I mean, there were times where and my kids were younger, where the ex would do things, their mom would do things that they would absolutely identify. They would get mad about, and I wasn't sitting there going, yeah, your mom's a brat. I would just kind of just let them go open loop and not really engage. And it was stuff with different sports and different things that we were dealing with. And inevitably, they always would reset. And if that conversation did come up, they didn't even remember it. You would have to remind them, which isn't necessarily a good thing. I'm not recommending this because it doesn't serve any purpose, to talk to them about it, and then for them to go, oh yeah, I guess that kind of happened, right? And it's really frustrating. Now, I'm talking about that back in the day whenever I wasn't really dealing with this in an appropriate way, because what I'll tell you is when you do stuff like that, anytime that you try to look like you're denigrating the other parent, and you know that they're doing it to you, especially because the other parent is drilling into their head that you're doing it, right? So they are on the lookout for you to do anything. So anything that you say or do that can fall into that category, they are going to immediately jump on and accuse you of being biased or hating hating their mom in this situation and stuff like that. And so it doesn't serve any purpose, right? And I'm telling you guys this from experience, because I made those mistakes. I mean, you want to do it. I mean, you really want to do it. You want to outline in a PowerPoint presentation with details every time the other parent has done something egregious. And it serves no purpose. Your kids have to figure it out on their own. And the point of this video is as they're figuring it out, they are going to figure it out and forget. Figure it out and forget. I don't know why I'm going up and down, but that's the thing. And it'll drive you crazy in the beginning because, like I said, you will think that they got it. You will think that, okay, they're finally realizing it. They're going to hold, in this situation, their mother accountable, and maybe things will change. And they're not. It isn't going to happen because because the kids really want a relationship with their mom and the other parent. The kids really want the other parent to love them. They want the attention. They want to feel like they're important. And like I've talked about before, they will look for every little crumb to validate that in their own mind. The same way that we did when we were with them. Maybe some of you guys out there knew that something was wrong right from the beginning and didn't fall in the trap. More than likely, if that's the case, you're probably not at this channel because this stuff wouldn't really pertain, right? I mean, if I would have known that I was that I made a mistake, if I would have known, rationalized it, and actually accepted that I had made a mistake and I was doing things to try to either make it better or get out of it, then I wouldn't be in the situation I am now, right? And I think a lot of us are in that category. Plus, they don't start as abusive. they start fine and it progresses over time. So anyone who's susceptible to this wants that illusion to be true so badly that you ignore it. The same situation is with our kids. They don't want this to be true. I mean, that's why if you look at it, if you have an overtly abusive ex, right? And they are just tearing your kids apart and just being basically cruel, overtly cruel to your children, what you'll notice is they still want to see the other parent, and they're upset about it and they're hurt about it. And then they blame themselves. They think that reason mommy or daddy doesn't like them or love them or isn't interested in them or doesn't care about them is because of them. It's just, it's kind of the way we're wired, right? So our role on this, and the reoccurring message you've heard me say, is we're mitigating that damage. We're trying to do everything in our power to provide as stable of an environment for our children as we possibly can, to give them a safe place to land when they're getting abused, right? And that means that when they do come and talk to you, because ultimately they will, it may take a while. I mean, it took, in my situation, it took 3.5, years before my oldest has actually started communicating more directly about what he's going through. And the thing is that then our role is, it sucks and it's tough, is we just have to be like the compassionate friend. We have to find the little nuances to say that when it's a put down, that it's not true, and that, the negativity, to not let it engulf them. But we cannot get mad at the ex. Well, I mean, we can behind closed doors and with our friends, but you can't do it with your kids. And the hard part about it is that the reason you can't is because you need them to be able to talk to you. And when they're in the middle of all of this, they're already thinking that you're completely, okay, we are biased. I mean, that's a given. I mean, to be honest, to try to say, well, I'm not biased, I'm biased, okay? It is what it is. You're going to be in the same mode, but you have to create that environment to where you can allow them to communicate. You can even allow them to poke you in the eye about things that are important to them that maybe hurt their feelings and not take it personally, and be able to talk about it rationally, to continue to build that relationship and to build that trust so that they can talk to you. And like I said, the hard part is you're going to have that experience. At some point, you will have that experience if you're not having it now. If you're not already having it now, I mean. And they're going to go see their other parent and come back, and it'll be like nothing happens. And it's frustrating because you really want them to deal with it. You want them, like I'll give you an example. The other day, where I took, my son hasn't been able to go to one of his therapy appointments just because of scheduling and some school functions. So I was able to get him in yesterday. I mean, we had a really good day. I mean, we went out to lunch and did some stuff, and and part of the problem was, so he was in a good mood, so he went to talk to his therapist. I asked him later, it's like, hey, how did it go? And realistically, he didn't even address any of those issues, right? Because at the time it wasn't a big deal. And so it's almost like you can get in this mode to where you feel like they're not validating the reality of the situation. And my point is, you have to let them deal with it and process it in their own time. You have to. I mean, and doing anything else, all it will do is shut down communication, shut down that dialogue, and not give your kid a venue to talk about it. I mean, think about it. Just as we are in this weird situation to where we have limited people we can talk to about it because it doesn't make sense and they don't get it, your kids are in the same boat. Not everybody's divorce is narcissistic in nature, and other people won't necessarily understand. I mean, how do you explain, I mean, think about it. In my situation, we live a mile apart. Kids go to school with, and there's this transition thing, and it's been 5 years. Why would anyone think that this is still a disaster. It shouldn't be, right? By this point in time, after, at the 5-year mark, the ex and I should be able to communicate, have a decent relationship. All that negative crap should be behind us, and it's not, right? And the problem is that even now, like I've talked before, even now whenever she tries to pretend that she wants to change the relationship, there's 5 years of predatory behavior that I would be remiss to ignore and allow that back in my life. I mean, so it's a train wreck. And it's hard for your kids to explain that to other people, because most people at this stage, after this many years, mom and dad can basically get along and fake it, and there's communication and stuff like that, but folks, in our situation, it's not that way. So, I kind of went off on a tangent with that, but I just wanted to talk about it because the key of this video is the conversations you have with them, with the realization, and then how it goes away, and then you start back over. Now, I'll tell you, that Groundhog Day is a little bit easier than, back 5 years ago, when every day the kids were actively fighting, right? And that was happening. So these situations just morph. It's like it really tries your patience, because every time you think you figured something out, it morphs a little bit or changes a little bit to where you have to adjust. So, okay, so on that, I hope this helps you guys, and I hope that if you're dealing with it, I hope it explains it. And if you're not, I hope you can remember it, so when it happens, it doesn't throw you for a loop, because it did for me, and I don't want that to happen to you. So on that, if you have something you want to add in it, please add it in the in the comment section below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, please subscribe, and I will chat with you guys on the next video. So take care. Bye.